Cochrane's productivity treadmill is a theory developed by an agricultural economist in the 1950s. The ag economist's name was Willard Cochrane, as the name you would think implies. It explains why farmers adopt technology at the same time seeing farm incomes fall and consolidation happening. So that's what this theory explains. We are now going back to our brief history of corn yield slides, and again, recall back in the late 1930s, 1940s, we began an upward trend on corn yields. Those corn yield increases happened largely because of technological adoption. Note that before 1930, there were no trends in yields, and that largely occurred because there were largely no technological change occurring. Now, it's important to realize that prior to the 20th century, up to about the 1930s, farmers were largely self-sufficient. By that I mean they did not purchase their production inputs. They didn't buy seed. They saved seed from previous years' production and planted that again. They didn't purchase fertilizers, the commercial synthetic fertilizers. They did not use herbicides. Pretty much everything that was used on the farm was made on the farm, except maybe for some small or large or whatever machinery, but that was largely long-lived assets. So pretty much farms were self-sufficient. But as we began to see yield increases, farmers began to rely on seed, fertilizer, herbicides, so they purchased those each year, and machinery as well. And I'm making a note here, machinery may not be yield increasing, but it is labor saving. That allowed consolidation. So as we look at these consolidation or yield increases, they largely caused farmers to be reliant on production inputs. So here is the treadmill theory, and I took this passage on the left-hand side of your screen from an article in Land Economics in November 1996 by Levins and Willard Cochrane. Both of those were at Minnesota at the time. So let's just read it. The theory was first introduced as a product price treadmill in which farmers constantly strive to improve their incomes by adopting new technologies. Early adopters, so those that adopt it first, make profits for a short while because of lower input production costs. As more farmers adopt the technology, however, production goes up, prices go down, and profits are no longer possible, even with the lower production cost. We're in a perfectly competitive environment, i.e., so our profits go to zero. Average farmers are nonetheless forced to lower product prices to adopt the technology and lower their production costs, even if they are to survive at all. The laggard farmers who do not adopt the new technology are lost in the price squeeze and leave more for the more successful farmers to expand. This theory, if you read it and think about it, explains why farmers, at least in the Midwest, are very technological oriented, are willing to adopt new technologies. They do it to get those short-run profits. So let's talk through this process for the early adopters. First, there's a new technology that comes to the market. And I'm going to use the example that it's a new corn hybrid that will increase corn yields by $10 per bushel, 10 bushels per acre. The important point here is that we don't know if this hybrid will do that for certain, so not everyone will adopt. So let's put some revenue on this. Let's say the price is $4, and we get $40 of additional revenue from the 10 bushel increase times a $4 price. However, there are additional costs. Those in this example will total $30 per acre, and we'll say that there's higher seed cost. The seed company charges the farmer more for the seed to capture some of the increases in yields, so that's $25. And just because of the way it works, we'll have to increase fertility, so that's $5. So there's a $30 of additional cost, and the early adopters gain $10 per acre. Obviously, early adopters will adopt, and they'll make $10 more per acre. All right, so the process will continue and more farmers will adopt. And lo and behold, there will be a supply and price impact. So, you thought you might get through this course without seeing a supply and demand curve? Well, you're wrong. They're over there to the right. And so now we're going to shift that supply curve so that we can see what happens as more and more people adopt the technology. What happens is the supply curve shifts to the right, as is indicated by supply 2 in my example here. Quantity goes up, Q1 to Q2, and price goes down from P1 to P2. So, if you think about total revenue for the agricultural sector, it'd be P1 times Q1, and you're not sure that the new one, P2 times Q2, is larger than P1 times Q1. It depends on the elasticity of the demand curve. However, you do know that consumers are better off because they get more supply, higher quantities at a lower price. All right, let's continue the example. So early adopters had additional profit at $10, but as time goes on, price goes down to $3. And I'm just putting an example here. $3 times 10, we have 0 additional profit or revenue, additional profit from this process. So in the end, we end up back to where we were. Another caveat here is that a lot of this would get capitalized into land. So if there was additional profit, it would go into rents. The price response depends again on the elasticity of the demand curve, and many have argued that farmers actually have less revenue and less income as technological changes have happened in the past. So let's summarize the process. Early adopters see increased production at lower cost, farm incomes increase, and it also drives price down. Later adopters, farm income falls as prices fall, forced to adopt lower cost technologies to survive at the lower prices. Farmers are on the treadmill, always running to adopt the newest technologies to keep up so that their farms can be profitable and so that they can stay ahead of declining real prices. As a result, farm incomes shift to early adopters, which happen, or we believe, are usually the larger farmers. Later adopters drop out, and we have farm consolidations. All of that then leads to shrinking number of farms. The winners of this process clearly are consumers. They are the ones that get more consumption, more food at lower prices. Cochrane's treadmill theory is a theory, so it's not necessarily true, but if this theory is true, we should see 2 items: declines in real agricultural prices and also declines in food prices over time. So I'm going to demonstrate those 2 items, agricultural prices and food prices. Let's start with corn prices. I'm going to look at corn prices in my examples, and here are nominal corn prices. You can see those. Actually, if you're looking at that, you can see that there's trends are distinct periods in corn prices. And again, these are nominal. From 1947 to 69, corn prices were relatively stable, averaged about 160. From 73 through 2006, they were didn't trend up or down, averaged about 240. Since 2006, they took a big increase, but have been averaging around 460. The trend, or the observable item about commodities, is that they usually have long periods of stable nominal prices and then jumps either up or down. Corn has jumped up, and those jumps up or down occur when new drivers in demand happen. For corn, one of those was in the mid 1970s when export demand for grains increased, and in 2006 or mid 2000s it was because of ethanol, corn use in producing ethanol. So we take those nominal prices, state them in real terms. I happen to deflate them by the GDP price deflator, and you can see a downward trend generally over that time period. Jump up in 2006 because of the new demand, but overall, during the entire period since the 1940s, we have seen declining real prices in corn. Here you will see the percent of U.S. expenditures on food. And I decided to take this approach to it because if we pick any particular food, we could actually see price increases because of technological improvements in the food. And let me give you an example here. Bread. Bread really hasn't changed a lot since the 1940s, so if you get a standard bread, actually the price of that has declined. However, if you buy a fufu bread or something, or go to Panera Bread or whatever and buy something there, you would actually may see prices increase because you're buying convenience and whatever it is that you're buying. But overall, um, U.S. consumers have spent less on food, which would indicate that overall we have seen the real price of food decline because we're not consuming more calories overall, not much anyway. And the other thing to keep in mind here is that what consumers eat have changed over time. We buy more convenience. We eat out more, for example, now. We buy more packaged foods to make it easier for us to consume. So we're buying more with our food. At the same time, it is costing less. I want to mention a couple caveats to the treadmill theory. One of those relates to increasing demand for food. So if we had a situation where food demand was increasing, like perhaps we have today with export demand, we could see higher prices even as the treadmill work. And let me give you an example here. Here's our old supply curve that we saw earlier, our shift in supply curve. Now let's add a second demand curve representing a shift. All right, so we could actually, and you see that listed here, in this, or shown here in this slide, it is not immediately evident which way under growing demand, whether prices will increase or decrease over time, and that depends on technological change. So in our examples here, we still might see not as much of a decline in price if we see increases in demand for food. Levin and Cochrane actually also extended the original treadmill argument over into land tenure. They included land rents in their land economic argument and looked at that issue a bit more closely. That does change things a bit, and we will talk about land tenure and cash rents as we move forward into this semester. All right, let's go through a summary here, and let's do this summary for farmers and consumers. Farmers. Technology is a major driver. It is impacting agriculture, the production sector, and there are winners and losers. Early adopters tend to be winners. Losers are those that are later adopters. For those who are going to manage farms or go back home and farm, you have to choose how you're going to respond. And there are sort of two approaches. I'll give you either or here, and there's many in between probably. You can aggressively pursue growth, and by that I mean being technologically advanced, or you can search for niche markets. One of those might be organics or something like that, trying to get off of that treadmill, productivity treadmill. Consumers actually are the big gainers in technological change. They get additional product at lower prices. Although often they seem to be sore winners, I guess. We see a lot of concern about commercial agriculture and technology these days. And sometimes it does appear, to me at least, and maybe this is my jaded view, that some consumers want to kill the goose that lays the golden eggs and want to stop technological progress, whether that's in genetically modified seed, use of herbicides, or fertilizers. Again, we'll talk more about that as we're moving through this semester. Here are our review questions for this module. Describe Cochrane's treadmill theory. Who gains and loses from technological change? And then finally, describe the impact of prices in the supply-demand graph. All of those things we talked about in this module.